Woke up today and I said, you know what I should do? I should get my channel in trouble by talking about slavery. Because I read somewhere that white people don't like to talk about slavery, and that's white fragility. And I was like, my dad did not raise me to be a fragile man. No, I have strength of character, and as such I will talk about slavery. There you go. So now everyone who thinks white people are fragile, you can look at me talking about slavismus. Okay, so the reason that I got a little bit annoyed is that a study, which came up a couple of years ago, but I just found out about it, claims that a lot of students, the intelligentsia, the future academics, right, they think that America invented slavery. And then my personal favorite saying, black studies professor says slavery is a white people thing. You know, I remember when I was a kid, if you saw someone that doesn't behave properly, if he doesn't have a rich vocabulary, you would say, well, he's an uneducated person. You shouldn't have prejudice against him. His parents just didn't afford to send him to a proper school. Nowadays, if you see a similar person with a limited vocabulary and acted improperly, you're going to say, oh, don't be prejudiced against him. His parents sent him to an American school. They got uneducated at an American university. And the reason for this is that back in the day, universities were there to just teach a person to be qualified for a job. For example, you would pay a lot of money for a university and then you become a lawyer and you get that money back from being a lawyer. Nowadays, a lot of universities, especially things that end with studies, are not there to teach people how to get a job. They're there to teach people how to get revolutionaries and think un-American concepts. And what do I mean by un-American concepts? Because that sounds so grandiose. It's like, oh, V, what are you talking about? Well, see, Romania's constitution is heavily influenced by the US Constitution. And I think this is a great thing. Because the US Constitution is probably one of the more liberal constitutions in the whole world, believe it or not. If you disagree with me, show me one that's more liberal. And at the time of its creation, it caused a lot of uproar here in Europe because most people wanted to live under feudalism. Feudalism means that there are the highborn, the people, the betters, and the lowborn, the people that are the lowest. How can you say that everyone is created equal then? You completely destroy the fundamentals of monarchy. You completely abolish the idea that, yes, you have the nobility and the aristocracy and they are your betters. But no, America did it. They said all people are created equal. And these universities, with the narrative that they create, with the web that they are spinning, they're trying to say yes and no. You see, some people are less equal than others because some people have a moral guilt. Based on their DNA, they have this baggage hanging around them because their ancestors did certain evil things in the past. And now it is the onus of the people with the moral guilt to dedicate their entire lives from birth till death in order to constant work and try to change society, to dedicate their entire lives of being allies, to speak the last, to keep quiet, to just spread the message. And this is what the universities is doing, is they're creating revolutionaries with a concept that not all people are created equal, or at least yes, but some people have baggage, they have white privilege, they have all of these things that they need to work constantly in order to change. And the communists had a very similar system, except they did not apply it to race, they applied it to class. So if you happen to have had ancestors that were from the aristocracy, that had ties with the church, that had ties with authors that were counter-revolutionary in nature, they would apply the same level of stigma onto you. And it would be, yes, we're all equal under communism, but we have the class traders, we have the remnants of the bourgeoisie, and these people were treated with such levels of disdain and disrespect, not by the people around them, but by the party and the media and politicians, that you couldn't say, well, they are equal to anyone else. And again, like, these aren't the actual bourgeoisie oppressors. No, they were people that were tied to the bourgeoisie oppressors. And if you wanted to get into certain positions of university or become a lawyer or a prosecutor, you actually had to prove that your family has a decent background and you don't have any of these aristocrats or any of these bourgeoisie elements down your family line. Like, this was legal back then in a country that had an ideology that's based on equality. Some people were more equal than others. And there's even a documentary that talks about how a member from the inner party wanted to marry the daughter of an old aristocrat. And this caused a massive scandal in the party. Like, what do you mean you get to marry her? You're not allowed to marry her. But the thing was that they had to have the marriage in secret because he was the son of a farmer, of a peasant, and this was like very prestigious, incredibly prestigious. Like, you're the son of a peasant. Oh, the working class, right? The creme de la creme. But she, as I mentioned, was the daughter of a noble. So this unholy union wasn't allowed to take place. So they had to get married in secret, and there's a whole documentary in Romanian. I would have translated it, but, copyright things. So I get to see now in America, like, the same system that used to happen in my country, except it wasn't based on race, it was based on class. It's a horrible system, a disgusting system, and it doesn't create a system which causes mutual respect. It's not even a place where you would like to live in as a community. It's like, okay, well, someone is destroying the property of my neighbor. Yeah, but my neighbor, he is from the bourgeoisie class. He is from, I don't care, And then when someone destroys my property, my neighbor goes like, well, he didn't help me when I needed him. Why would I help him? So, it doesn't create these safe communities. If you have like this system where people constantly mistrust each other and are constantly vilifying, not even on things that they did, but things that, because of the color of their skin, that's the problem. Now, you might say, oh, V, it's not just the color of their skin. Really? Let me give you an example. I hear a lot of talks about reparations. This is an American concept, okay? And the idea is that white people owe reparations to black people. Perfect. Let's assume that this is the case. Let's say that 10 years from now, this law actually gets passed and is being enforced. Is it going to be enforced properly, though? Or is it going to be enforced in a prejudice way? The proper way to enforce it would be to find out who are the descendants of the slaves, who are descendants of the slave owners, and the contract happens between these two people. The prejudice way would be to eyeball it. It's like, okay, well, you're white, and therefore you pay the tax, the jizya. So, which one do you think is going to be the case? Like, if it's being enforced. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree or you disagree with the law. Let's say you have the law, how do you think it's going to be enforced? Because here's the problem. If I go to America now, they eyeball me and they say, well, I'm white. But Romanians and definitely my ancestors never owned a slave in their life. In fact, it's quite possible that my ancestors were victims to a different form of slavery, which was feudalism. Like in Romania, peasants, unlike other European countries, they weren't allowed to leave their land. They weren't allowed to freely travel wherever they wish. They were at the border edge of poverty and they were starving, but they had to first farm the crops for the noble and then they could farm something for them. They had to pay taxes to the church, they had to pay taxes to the nobles, they had to pay taxes for the Ottoman Empire, they had to pay taxes for the Russian protectorate. The life of a peasant, I'm not saying it was the same like a slave in America, no, heaven forbid, but it was still, a life of oppression. And then I've got also the communists coming over, which managed to oppress me for a little bit too. So, if I travel with my ancestral baggage, if I travel to America, oh, I'm white and therefore I'm oppressed and therefore I would also have to pay reparations, even though I've never owned a slave or my ancestors or anyone, right? But if you have a black person that goes into America today, let's say he travels from Somalia gains American citizenship through legal means, he's going to receive reparations, even though his ancestors were enslaved by the Americans. How does that make sense? And you know what? Like, if you want to go for the maximum comedic effect, Beyonce, which dressed up in a Black Panther uniform, and, she did a lot of activism for the black community and whatnot. But in The Guardian, she reveals that as she traces down her family heritage, she finds out that she's got slave owner blood within her family. And this actually destroyed her because she had to come to grips with it, and she had to accept the fact that she's got not white blood in it. No, like the blood of a slave owner. So what do you do with these people? Do they get reparations? But the narrative comes from a point of historical contention that is prejudiced in nature, because it's like all white people were evil and all black people were good. And it doesn't actually try to find out, right, but which white people had slavery, which black people were slaves. No. It's just like a big brush. And if you bring it up, I'm pretty sure it's racism.